My parents could be a bit eccentric, and they went to the Ideal Home exhibition and they saw a log cabin and they bought it for me because it was cheap. And one day a lorry turned up at my house and dumped this huge pile of wood in the front, and it had sat there for about 2 or 3 years because I never asked for a log cabin and I just didn't have the time to do anything with it. But suddenly in August 2007 I thought, thank God I've got the log cabin. So I built it at the end of the garden. It was very good weather. My dad helped me do the concrete base. I did the rest of it myself. It's a weird moment in time actually. It's kind of like a storm's coming, I need to build this shelter.
You're listening to The Corruption Diaries Season 2, all about the music exec turned tax justice campaigner Richard Allen. I'm Naomi Fowler. An obscure tax loophole is sinking Richard's business.
By the summer of 2007, it's just a case of how long can I carry on. I was heading towards our doom and all I could do was delay it. I remember one of my employees saying, why are you spending so much time dealing with all these politicians? The business is suffering. I said, listen, the business is dead in the water unless I stop this.
He's got one card left to play to stay afloat. It goes back to his time managing and signing bands, including the extremely successful band Porcupine Tree, to his record label.
That catalogue was everything that I'd worked towards over the years. I didn't want to sell it, but I had to because we just wouldn't have had any money if I hadn't done that. That's the thing that gave me the anger that went after HMRC.
HMRC is the British Tax Authority.
All that effort, all that time, and you wrecked it with one stupid bit of legislation. It felt like I had been robbed by an invisible entity at gunpoint.
Richard was still running his record label Delirium, which he'd founded in the early 90s. By 2007, his mail order business, the Freak Emporium, was struggling under the weight of the tax loophole. For years, the Freak Emporium had kept his record label Delirium going. It had funded tours and studio time. Now it was time for Delirium to come to the rescue.
So a catalogue is the rights in the music, all of the recordings that a record label controls. Over the years, Delirium built up a catalogue of music, which included Porcupine Tree and a whole bunch of other bands. Delirium owned the intellectual property rights in the recordings, which is not unusual for a record label because you put all of that time and investment into something. A lot of it doesn't do well. So I had the rights in those recordings, and about 2005 I licensed all the Porcupine Tree product to a label with the intention of it coming back to me in 2012. As we did worse and worse, it was 2007, I had to sell the rights. Somebody made me an offer. I would have said no if it had been not for the case that I thought the company was going to go under. I realised that if I sold those rights, that money would basically take us through the bad patch. Otherwise, the family would have had no income whatsoever. But I had to sell it at a knockdown price at short notice. None of the things that happened at that time I wanted to do. I was having to react to forces that were being thrust upon me. And it was horrendously stressful. The collapse in Delirium couldn't have happened at a worse time, because we had 3 young children and Julie had just been made redundant from her job in IT and had been working at the label and using up her redundancy money. So it happened at the worst possible moment. My accountant just said, keep going until you sink, basically. I was completely shattered by that point. I was in work. We were only down to like 2 people on the mail order. My second in command, Mike Jones, said to me, take the day off, as he could tell I was really stressed out. We'd already been through 2 years of trying to save our business, and we'd tried absolutely everything.
Richard's mail order business was being undercut by companies using a tax loophole to save about £2 on every CD sale by not paying VAT or VAT, similar to sales tax. Companies were sending their products on a round trip from the UK to the Channel Islands, gaining a tax advantage equivalent to 20% on the price.
The CD was selling now for like $6.99. It had been selling for like $11.99. There'd been this competitive distortion that forced prices down.
Richard took his colleague Mike's advice to take some time off. He went home and decided to carry on building the shed his parents had surprised him with.
I was in the garden, I think I was chopping wood or something. I had my Walkman on. And it suddenly hit me, that's it. We can't go any further. It's unviable. We can't save this business. It's finished. And I remember going back to the office and saying to Mike, there's no point trying to keep this going. We should think about winding it down and shutting it. And he was going, well, there's this we could do and that we could do. And eventually he even realised that there was nothing more that we could do to keep it going. And, he said to me, you're absolutely sure? I said, yep, it's pointless. It's better that we close it now in control of the situation than leave it to the last minute where we just crash into the ground. We literally sold everything in the building, December the 6th, 2007. I went to see a liquidator in London. They totally understood the position that we were in. And that it wasn't our fault that the company was closing. They did a fantastic job. We closed the company and I felt huge relief. I managed to pay off absolutely everybody and walked away from it with a bit of money. Last time we were in the office was on New Year's Eve. Me and Matt Platt, he was my computer guy. We went in there on New Year's Eve 2007, late at night, at midnight I think, had a drink amongst all the sort of rubble that was in there. We just left all the papers and stuff, locked the door and left. And that was a weird moment. It was the opposite of when I'd left Sanderson's, thinking this is fantastic, driving into the sunset. Now we were coming back out of the sunset, heading into the underworld. I was extremely angry at the reason that I had had to close it. I could understand it if the company had been unprofitable. That's the thing, you accept that, you walk away from it. For a record label to be shut down by the tax authority is about as un-rock and roll as you can imagine. I actually felt elated during the first month because I didn't have to deal with any of this anymore. However, I suffered some kind of post-traumatic stress type thing that all kind of hit me in that first 3 months after Delirium shut. I just don't think I realised that I was building up all that stress over that period, and it kind of like hit me afterwards. It was like all of this action and then like nothing. Without a doubt, it affected our family, but in many ways it made it stronger in the longer term. But at the time, it was obviously not a great period because it's like, what are you going to do now? What does an ex-record label owner do next? I had skills that are useless anywhere else. I needed to think about it.
But this was also the year of the 2008 global financial crash.
Going bust at that time was the worst thing in the world because you couldn't get a job. I kept myself going with selling advertising for a magazine at one point. I spent most of the next year recovering and gardening. And then in November 2008, that piece was interrupted. Out of the blue, one day I had a letter from Holland & Barrett, the high street health food store. And this was like some kind of weird cosmic kind of event because they had received a letter from the European Commission addressed to me, addressed to the Forum of Private Business.
That's the FPB, the Forum of Private Business, the campaign group Richard came across when he was first researching this issue.
And I'd totally forgotten that we lodged a complaint at the European Commission through the Forum of Private Business. And the letter said to Holland & Barrett, we're taking on your complaint, but we haven't heard back from you. And if we don't hear back from you, we're going to close it. And Roger Craddock, who was the legal director of Holland & Barrett, I got him on the phone and he said, we made a complaint about the same issue to the European Commission because it's affecting us. They dismissed our complaint because Holland & Barrett made a mistake. They said to the European Commission that the legislation itself was at fault, whereas the complaint we'd made was that the legislation was being abused. Holland & Barrett's claim had been ditched by the Commission, said we don't accept that there's a fault with this legislation.
That's the LVCR legislation. LVCR is Low Value Consignment Relief, the European legislation that meant items sold below £18 coming from outside the EU didn't have to pay VAT or VAT, a sort of sales tax.
But they'd written back to them thinking for some reason that it was the form of private business, saying, but we're taking on this other complaint. And Roger Craddock said, well, we're happy to help you with this. I think you need to respond to them because they're going to close it. And it looks like they've taken it on. So I rang up the Forum of Private Business and everyone there had left and no one knew anything about this. So it appeared that the Commission had taken on the complaint, written to the Forum of Private Business who hadn't replied. So they'd then written to Holland and Barrett and it got to me. So I then rang up the Commission and said, I was involved in this. Can I do it? And they said, well, yeah, but you would have to resubmit the complaint under your name. Now, I managed to get hold of Martin Smith, who had worked for the Forum of Private Business and had been their representative at the European offices in Brussels. And he said, listen, I'll help you write this. Martin's brilliant. He knew all of the language, how to lay it out, the format. And essentially what Martin did was teach me how to become a civil servant in Brussels. I made the decision, right, the only way to fight these people is to play them at their game. And since I'd had a lot of background in law in the music industry, because I had to deal with a lot of recording contracts, I was fascinated by this. So I thought, I think the term is get all lawyered up. It was more all sort of civil servanted up. I was going to teach myself to speak the language they spoke and to do the things they did, but do it better than them. My friend Mark, when he saw me doing all of this work, he sort of jokingly handed me this bit of a pencil that was all chewed, about 2 inches long, and said, this is a magic pencil, it's the pencil of justice. And I just thought it was ridiculous. So I actually said to him, you know what, I'm going to take that with me everywhere and sign everything with it as a bit of a good luck token. And I did. I went to Brussels. There's an organisation called Impala, who are the European independent music body out in Brussels. And I went to see them, got on well with them. And we went to see the officials. I was granted a meeting with Patrice Piet, head of the VAT unit, and also the head of the legal unit, Nicole Weimer. So she was the top lawyer at the EU. We got on like a house on fire. Immediately I could tell they wanted to go for this. In many ways, the European project is kind of a bit like a religion. All the people that I met involved in it sincerely believe in the EU model. They're all dedicated towards harmonisation. So for me to come along and say, oh, there's this bending of the rules and abuse was like, grist to the mill for them. So they were like saying to me, we don't understand why the UK would do this. What's so special about these islands? Surely this is bad for every business in the UK. And I said, exactly. And they said, well, listen, if you can prove to us that what you're saying is true, then we'll get behind this. You've just had the European Commission say to you, we're prepared to fight your corner against the UK. Who wouldn't take that offer up? I got every single major music industry body to write a letter of support to this complaint. I got the Music Managers Forum, the PRS, the MCPS, the Musicians Union. I don't think HMRC realised who I was, but I brought together the entire music industry against them to show that what they had done was wrong. Martin wrote the initial complaint.
That's Martin Smith, the Forum of Private Businesses representative in Brussels.
I provided a lot of the information. It was enormous. It was about 1.5 inches thick. We put loads of evidence in and we resubmitted it to the Commission and they accepted it and they wrote to the UK government.
You've been listening to episode 9 of the Corruption Diaries, season 2. with me, Naomi Fowler, produced by me and by Leo Schick. In the next episode, things heat up.
If you don't fix this, I am going to assist the Commission in their prosecution of the UK, and they will win.
Delirium Records music used in this episode was courtesy of Cherry Red. If you liked a song, see the track listing in the episode notes.